We're third generation. Third generation.
You're third generation.
Yeah.
So that means...
Of Stavitsky. But this is the same place where we've been on since 1882.
1882, that was your father that came over?
Grandfather.
Grandfather.
Yeah. That's my grandfather, then my father, and we're the sons of the father.
So Benny's your brother?
Benny's my brother, yeah.
Oh, very easily, yes. My father, well, in Europe, when all Jewish young boys had to enter the army, and if they ever got them in, they were there for life. And he did what very many people did. It was a common occurrence there. If a young non-Jewish boy died, they buried them with the name of the Jewish boy who would have to go in, and they cost them money. They paid money for that privilege. And he was buried according to records, and he wasn't alive, so he was not called to the army. But then someone squealed on him, and he heard that he was being squealed upon, and by that time they had 4 children. And so he walked, they had a big dairy farm, and he walked through his own cornfield in the night and came alone at first. He came to Norma, as a matter of fact. And he became an apprentice to Mr. Cohn in the building business, carpentry. And he worked very hard that year, and I understand he lost a lot of weight, you know, from the stories we were told, to save his money because he couldn't bring anything with him. And he sent for my mother within the year. And they built that house in Brotmanville. They lived in Norma for a short time, right opposite the cemetery, I think. No, opposite Hershkowitz's, where the river was. And they rented there for a while, but then they built this house in Brotmanville and moved to Brotmanville, and the rest of us were born here.
The farm parcels were approximately 15 acres, between 13 and a half and 15 acres. Now those parcels on the map, when it was surveyed, were given numbers. 1, 2, 3, and so forth. The numbers were then put into a hat, as we say, and then the people, the refugees in those days, they drew numbers. If they drew number 2, whatever was number 2 on the map, that was to be their farmland, their 15 acres. And it was up to them then to clear the land, to pull out the stumps, chop down the trees, and to cultivate it, and to plant these crops and so forth. And then eventually they built homes, two-room houses, 1 room downstairs, 1 room upstairs. That was the original house. I told you there are 3 left in the Alliance colony there. That's how they got their land.
I told you that my father was a butcher and he gave credit to everybody. And if the strawberries weren't any good, if they were good, he'd get paid. If they weren't any good, he'd have to wait for the blackberries. If the blackberries were no good, he had to wait for the sweet potatoes. And if the sweet potatoes were no good, he had to wait till next year. They couldn't be helped.
Did your grandparents ever tell you about what it was like in Russia?
In Russia, no, they didn't talk too much about it. Only that they had the roughest time any human could ever had living on this earth, you know. They were hounding them all the time. The Jews had a terrible, tough time. And they just pogroms, you know, during the Tsarist Russia days, they come away from there, finally made it. Like I say, we're the 3rd generation.
Did they talk about the first days of settling down here? Like what it was?
Yeah, harsh winters and rough. This little building was only the 2 rooms, the high part. See, all that other part was added on by us.
Right.
See, it was only 2 rooms, and they raised the families in there. And that's the way most of these colonists had it. Those small shacks, 2-room shacks.
But your grandparents, they survived all right, or?
Yeah, the all but the children. Like my father died young, his brother Jake died young. It was always something that came up.
So he became a butcher. He learned the butcher trade and learned it very, very well. But he was much too kind. And by the time my brother Joe grew up, he found that he was owed more than he had. He wouldn't press people that had small children. And those days, there was no unemployment insurance, and the factories had seasons of maybe 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and the other time they didn't work, and the people couldn't pay for their food, really. They all had a charge everywhere at all the places. So when Joe grew up, he didn't like that idea, and by that time my older brother was in the poultry business, so my father went in with them. Because as I said, in factories or in any seasonal work, the summer there was seasonal work, there was very little to do in the winter except in factories, but it was seasonal work for the people of the community. And there was also a factory in Norma that some of them used to go to when there wasn't work in this one. But you were with your neighbors, you were like, it was one family. It really wasn't that there were strangers next door. Everybody, all the community were like one family. If there was trouble in one household, I remember one man was very, very ill and he had TB. Well, the whole community was concerned and helping his wife while he went to an institution to try to get cured. Everybody took care of everybody else, always. I remember in the First World War when you couldn't get sugar. If one got sugar from their child in New York or Philadelphia or somebody, it was shared. You just didn't keep it for yourself. Somebody else needed it for their hot tea also.
They were not farmers from Russia or Poland either. They were not farmers. It was just an idea that was promoted in the hopes of getting him out of Europe and bringing him here. And what else could they do here? They didn't know the language, nothing else. And what do you do when you get people? Farming has always been a universal occupation for people who don't know any language. You don't need any fancy language to talk to chickens or cows or anything like that.
Well, the entertainment was Professor Monnier. Professor Monnier was sent down to give us a little about current events in ancient history, so we could have something.
Sent down by?
By the Jewish Agricultural Society, or it may have been the Hirsch Fund. And he would come down with a horse and wagon with his wife and daughter. And she would sing, and his mother played the piano, and he would give us a talk. And we all went, it was done in a little factory. It was where they cut the cloth for the purpose of making the clothing in the Brotman factory.
I live in Philadelphia, but I
Oh.
come down here and spend a lot of time because I like it out in the open, the outdoors. We were always hunters and shooters and fishermen, you know.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, followed it all the way. We put a lot of time fishing and hunting. Like that's where to spend my time. We find these campsites, we could just tell by looking at it whether the Indians camped there or not with the water. They had to have water. We go and we hunt for water, and then if there's a field that's been farmed around there, we know that's it. Without water, they couldn't live.
Right.
So that's how we find all our animals. Walking into the sun, you can't see anything.
Right.
So always keep the sun at your back. And that's how we were able to find them where the other guys couldn't see them. We'd come right and back them and pick them up. You see all that collection? That's only part of what you saw. We got twice as many as what you saw on the wall.
But who would go out with you?
I have my brother Eddie was my hunting partner, but when he passed away, another boy joined me, a Ukrainian fella. We hunt together. Have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we ask permission, you know. It's all right with the farmer. We could hunt on there. We don't bother anything. We wouldn't pick up a penny if we saw it off his place. We're honest guys, you know, that's the way we were brought up. Honest. Treat people like you'd like to be treated yourself. And that's the way most of the people from the colony were. They'd help one another in sickness, you know. When somebody got down, they'd pitch in and do his work on a farm, the old-timers. I guess a lot of people like that today, but they're hard to come by. Everybody, it seems, is selfish. You know what I mean? They're looking out for themselves. The old-timers were a lot different.
You know, as a young child, I suppose, I thought it was not an easy life, you know, because the only recreational day for us, and then we weren't allowed to dance or do things, was the Sabbath. That's the one day you didn't work or didn't go to school. Every other day you had jobs to do and work to do. In the summer, we worked on other people's farms to earn extra money. And they all did something. No one just sat home and did nothing. There were no such thing as summer camps and things like that. But as I look back, it was a very serene and good life, really. You had good friends. You were content, I guess, with your life. You didn't know of better things. If we wanted to go to a movie or something, we came into Vineland if we could. We had horse and wagon. It was seldom, but we could do it. And the area, I guess, because all your friends are here and your family settled here. You don't want to go away from your family.
And then my father told me also a little incident that happened. My father had 4 brothers, and they lived not too far from Brotmanville there. They lived also on Henry Avenue. And they were just like some of the kids today. They were, how would you say it, they like to play pranks. And they got a hold of some man's goat in Brotmanville, and they sneaked the goat up onto the 3rd floor and then up on the roof. There was a way from the 3rd floor on the roof. There was a flat roof on the clothing factory. And that's where the goat was. And that was at night. And in the morning, this man looked for his goat high and low. The whole community looked for the goat. And then somehow or other, they took pity on the poor man because it looked as if he was going to get a heart attack. So finally, they told him where the goat was. And he was very happy when they found the goat up on the roof of the clothing factory.
What about when you went to high school? How did you get to high school?
With a horse and wagon. And the horses would, Abe Lynn, if you remember him, or Jack Lynn, his son, and maybe Moe. The horses walked all the way, and it took them about 2 hours to get to Vineland. There was nothing but muddy roads. It wasn't sandy, there was black, what they call it, gravel roads. But in the spring and fall, especially in the spring when the roads thawed out a little bit, it was just like in a miring of swamp condition. It had no heat, and we'd freeze almost. Many times I remember we were so cold that the janitor of the high school, which was then at 6th and Wood Street, he let us down to the basement so we could thaw out. That's how bad it was. No, everybody became part of the town. The town was a good town. Everybody, as I said, knew each other. They knew the extent of their ability, financial condition, and everybody went to synagogue on every holiday. And
Was there any crime?
None at all.
Did you ever lock a door?
No.